My name is Juri. I was born in Stuttgart 1962 in Deutschland. Some call it Germany, some others call it Alemania, so it's very confusing. I'm a citizen of Deutschland, Baden-Württemberg and European Union. So I am experiencing that my growing minority is becoming poor and disadvantaged, and that Europe has become much too big and powerful. They have 12 stars on their flag, 12 stars on the blue background, and now they are, even without Britannia, they are 26 or 27 states. So there is some discrepancy between the outer appearance and the inner, the symbolic appearance. Yeah, many contradictions.
I would ask the question, what actually is the EU specifically, rather than being like, see, the point I would say is that many of the things that you said about capitalism you could say are about capitalism in general. So you could say that the same processes that you speak about, you could take those processes to South America or even the United States of America and say that those processes are happening there as well. But that tends to override what is specific about the EU, what makes it different. And this is a question I think needs answering. What in fact is specific about the EU? And a lot of, I mean, I'm not just saying what you say for that fault. I think that's a general fault. So if you go back, for example, we used to say as Marxists that the state was indispensable for maintaining the stability of capitalism. Right? Now, but they also say that the EU is not a state. Now, the right wing, most of the right side like UKIP and all right wing, they're saying is that it's a super state. But but on the left, we're saying, well, the EU is not a state. Therefore, if it's not a state, it can't be indispensable for capitalism. So but it still raises a question about what it is, what its function is, vis-a-vis capitalism. And I do think we need to be specific about that question, rather than just being general.
Well, do people want to run it that way? Do you want? Yeah. Okay, take it that way, see.
I don't care much about political and economic theories and about many more or less true or wrong holies. I was long trying to find out the true to try to interpret the Apostle John, St. John, his revelation.
You're right. Sorry. Can John just respond to the last question? Can John just respond to the last question?
Pardon.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Well, the standard Marxist idea about Europe is the idea of inter-imperialist rivalry, isn't it?
Well, you asking me.
Well, I'm inventing. Right. So, the class struggle isn't just between workers and capitalists, it's between capitalists and capitalists. And Europe, or even, let's take particularly Germany, faced with the mass growth of American imperialism, would have found itself at an enormous disadvantage So all the manoeuvres to build a free trade area and then to build a European Union were attempts to build a counterweight to American imperialism on the one hand, to a certain extent, as a buffer against the USSR on the other, and more latterly to be able to compete with China. Now the problem here is, I think, I'm only suggesting this, I haven't thought about it too deeply, is that what the European Union has been quite popular, at least for periods of its growth. And why was it popular? It was popular because in the early periods of its growth, of its development, it was able to guarantee growth.
In peace.
Right.
Peace.
Okay. Well, peace is an important thing as well. So it guaranteed growth, and that growth, to a certain extent, benefited the workers as well. When you have a boom, the workers, and when capitalism grows, the workers benefit alongside the bosses. But if the rate of profit tends to fall, what happened is that Europe began to take countermeasures that negated any. Well, they weren't growing, so there wasn't that element, and there was also they became the coordinators of the attacks on the workers. So Maastricht, in particular, set up a straitjacket. Any of the individual countries could have resisted. They could have said, no, we're not accepting Maastricht. But Maastricht is a wonderful. We can't build any more hospitals or houses because we're only allowed to use 3% of public income, and we're not allowed to be unfair to private enterprise. They must have an equal crack of the whip. So once the rate of profit started to fall and the amount made available to the workers started to decline, then Europe became much less popular. The problem here is that the alternative to Europe is now being presented as the nation, and neither direction works, right? So if you're an enthusiast, let's say the Lib Dems and the Labour Right formed a government in Britain, they would be completely committed to Europe. And that commitment would mean further austerity in Britain. It would mean more wage cuts. It would mean more restrictions, because that's what Europe would require. On the other hand, if Boris went through, there would be a collapse in workers' rights, because the nation state is no longer able to produce in the same way. The cost of production would increase if you're limited to the nation, and the workers would have, that's the Brexiteers' idea. The Brexiteers' idea, got two ideas. One is keep the brown people out, and the other idea is if we get rid of all these regulations, the rate of profit will return. Nobody ever says what the regulations are. The regulations are things like the amount of overtime you have to work, what your hourly pay is, whether you get pregnancy leave and things like that. So those are the things that they want to do away with, and and some of them admit that. Some of them were extreme backs here and say, right, there will be a financial crash if we push out of Europe, but that's good because it will harden us up and we become Great Britain once again. So that's the contradiction. The contradiction is between Europe as a conglomeration of states trying to manage a weakening capitalism, and on the other hand, people who now advance nationalism as a way forward. But that's not a sustainable way forward. it doesn't, it will not advance the rights of the workers. So, the way to cut the Gordian knot from a socialist perspective is the slogan for United Socialist States of Europe. And the argument then becomes the socialist group say, well, you can't be making socialist demands, it'll frighten the workers. But there really is no alternative but to popularise demands like that.
Okay, Joe.
Yeah, the problem I have with what you've said, John, is it's not clear to me why you would take any particular side in this debate about whether you're opposed to or support Brexit. And maybe that is your position, that workers should abstain in this question because it's two capitalist alternatives, and the alternative is a United Socialist States of Europe, which you've posed as a demand. Unfortunately, it's not a demand because there's no one who will deliver that. Demands are something that you place on organisations or states in order to deliver something, or you place on a movement to deliver. There's no currently a working class movement across Europe demanding a United Socialist States of Europe. So the first thing we have to decide is, what is the nature of Brexit? Is it progressive or is it reactionary? In my view, it's wholly reactionary because it tries to reject the idea that capitalism will, in Marxist terms, increase the concentration and centralisation of capital at an international level. That will therefore try to internationalise its relations of production, its forces of production, and in doing that will create a European working class, because you can't create capitalism without a working class. You can't create a European capitalism without a European working class. And from a Marxist point of view, that is something progressive. It's progressive because everything that socialises, internationalises and concentrates the forces and relations of production is a step towards socialism. And that's the bedrock of Marxism, is that capitalism creates conditions which brings socialism closer. If you abstain on that basic tendency of capitalist development, you're really saying that socialism will come from somewhere else, which leads to the abstract positing of a United Socialist States of Europe. Because I don't think it's true to say that everything has been discredited. We're actually in the middle of a very, very important struggle where there are two basic arguments. One is that the UK should leave the European Union and others should follow, and the other is that no, this is a reactionary movement which is trying to push against the progress which capitalism can bring forward and which can empower the working class. And we have to make a choice with which one of those is correct. And in my view, Brexit is a reactionary step backwards and has revealed to a very significant extent the rotten roots of what now passes for many Marxist organisations, who act as if they can create socialism in one country. So we now have socialists arguing against the freedom of movement, that workers shouldn't be able to move from countries to country because they'll simply be used to exploit the native local working class. That's not an argument that Marx used about the Irish in Britain, who were used to undercut English and Scottish and Welsh workers' wages. He supported the Irish working class and supported the organisation of the working class in Britain. And that's a great Marxist attitude, to support the organisation of immigrant workers and the local working class. The first international was based on a particular type of worker who could move from country to country. We're aware that Marx was only one of tens of thousands of German immigrants in London, and that was the social base of the first international. The new international that can be built will be built on all those millions of workers who shift from country to country in Europe. So we have 1 million European Union workers in Britain who weren't allowed to vote in the last election. But it would be the basis for the building of a European-wide workers' movement. Because far from things being discredited, the two big camps in this fight haven't been discredited. Remainers are radicalising and making it the most important point, saying we are not going to accept Brexit, and Brexiteers are becoming more strongly Brexit, that they now want a no deal. Socialists have to find a way of intervening into that, and they will not do it by talking about the United States of Europe, which reduces itself to workers' discussion circles, which reduces itself to educating workers in Marxism. You do not turn the working class towards Marxism by teaching them in a didactic format, pedagogically, about what Marxism is about. That's not how Marx tried to do it, and it's not how Marxists today should be doing it. And far from the far left, like the Socialist Party and Social Workers Party, being sort of more relevant because they get in the way, they simply reflect the fact that there are things happening in our society which is breaking down, in the north certainly, the sectarian divide, very weakly and not in a way we would want. But the fact that people will probably get a bigger vote, the fact that more people declare themselves now the unionists or nationalists, the fact that the unionists are losing the majority, are all important signposts to where this society is going. And it's not enough to ignore all that and to think that you can't intervene into it. And I think that's what socialists in the north should be doing, is trying to look at all those developments which have started some time ago and which are still developing, to see how can socialists intervene into those who look for a left-wing alternative, those who don't define themselves as nationalists or socialists, and those who can say that unionists can't push its sectarian agenda if they don't have a majority. Those are all things that we can take advantage of if we recognise that they are important and stop thinking that what is important is getting rid of these useless left-wing organisations who collapse towards nationalism. And I think we should, in addition, take note of the fact that all the Republican groups are all in favour of Brexit, all the left-wing groups are all in favour of Brexit, and that, as far as I'm concerned, shows the complete bankruptcy of their politics. And that's what those who are in favour of an international workers' movement and international socialism should be pushing and arguing for, and making themselves the left-wing alternative to what is being pushed by the supporters of Brexit on the left and the right.
Right, okay. I think, well, if it's not clear, I think what the book makes clear, does make clear, is that we think that the terrain of Europe is a far better place to fight capitalism than the individual nation state. So, if you're asking if we are opposed to Brexit, yes, we are opposed to Brexit. Not because we support Europe, but because we think the European stage is where you can link up with a broader range of workers, and you're more likely to be able to build a resist, right? I did not use the word discredited. What I said is that these movements, both ends of the spectrum, had reached a strategic impasse. So for example, what will the short-term strategy of Germany and France be? Short-term strategy, as far as I can see, will be to try and concede elements to the right in the hope of preserving the structures of Europe. I actually think Brexit has been useful to them at one level, because what they've been able to say, and what they've been very keen to say to the populist groups throughout Europe, is they're saying, don't go down this road, because it will cause endless chaos. The Brits are not going to come out of this well. Don't do it. And to a certain extent, they've been successful. And the European right are sort of going back slightly. I think you're accusing us of generalising, and then you're generalising yourself. You're saying the concentration of capital leads towards socialism. And I put it just very slightly different, saying the concentration of capital makes more likely the development of socialism. But that's just an abstract theme, how does that express itself in reality? And it doesn't express itself by the more concentrated capital being nicer to the workers. It expresses itself by the more concentrated capital upping the class struggle and the workers trying to fight back. I don't think I accept what you're saying about Ireland. The thing is that about 3 years ago, the last attempt to save Stormont was the Fresh Start Agreement. And the trade union movement following an initial sort of opposition and demonstrations, decided to acquiesce to Fresh Start in order to save Stormont. And since that time, essentially there's been nothing. There's almost no demonstrations in the north of Ireland now. There's no, I mean, I've been on the demonstrations, but they're demonstrations like the demonstrations for feminism and for gay marriage and things like that are A, very loosely attached to the whole idea of class struggle, and B, absolutely based around lobbying Westminster to do something about this place, and being quite content when Westminster leaves to one side. There has to be some level of consciousness before you can begin discussing with people. If you say, I'm a socialist, and they say, what's that? My argument would be not that you... I just think that the situation we're in at the minute is obvious. We've taken a terrible... working class as a whole has taken a terrible hammering. And they are hanging on like grim death to existing political institutions. The way in which the left, if you like, saved themselves was by adapting to that. They said, you want reformism, here's some reformism, but it hasn't built anything for them. They're not in a situation to do anything. I mean, if you can concretize that and say, well, instead of having an abstract discussion or a workers' discussion group, you should be out joining A. Then we can discuss joining A. But what is A? I mean, the only people who actually come out as an opposition are the Republicans. The only fight going on at the minute is whether they're going to get their bonfire in Derry or not. And that's not, to tell the truth, that's not nothing. It's Sinn Féin trying to police this place, and that's not been successful. But I mean, we have to put things in a strategic context. In the South we had the Civil War. When did the South recover from the Civil War? I'm not sure they have yet. We've had the Troubles. When did we recover from the Troubles? From social partnership and from the Good Friday Agreement. I don't know any sign we've recovered. We've been knocked flat in our back, and that's where we are.
I'm yearning more united islands. There are more islands divided, like Cyprus, Guinea, and Hispaniola. They are divided islands, and I'm yearning more united islands. For Ireland, I would propose that Ireland, the southern Ireland, would leave the European Union too, and that Northern Ireland would leave the UK. Then they could easily unite somehow, and either as an independent state, independent island state, or as part of the British Commonwealth, like Australia, New Zealand, they are island states too. This is my vision for Ireland.
Thank you. Yeah.
It may sound a little bit kind of it may sound pessimistic about that there isn't people aren't interested in, I suppose, real socialism, or we call real socialism, which is the working class has taken a battering, and it is a fact, that I do think it is a fact that if you're talking the sort of socialist politics which we need, the sort of the radical kind of direction we have to go in, which is talking about the fact that the working class have to fight back. When you talk about those things, which are fundamental, actually, people it doesn't really register with people. It doesn't mean to say there weren't kind of all kinds of issues going on, and there's people who are interested in left-wing ideas. The support of Corbyn would show that, or even though his support has massively dropped back, which in a way shows the kind of that it's really very much an electoral kind of force in society. And you look at it is important to talk about those things, like, which is the organization, level of organization, the level of what the unions and strikes, things like that. They're the instruments of the working class, and you have to say that really isn't. There's a problem there. There's a massive problem there. But it doesn't mean I wouldn't be pessimistic about it. I just think that's the way it is, and I think what John is describing. It may sound, sort of like, well, why aren't you talking to, there's a lot of people might say, well, look at the vote of people before profit, and, that's that people are really interested in socialist currents and things like that, but, yeah, okay, but I think it's really good to actually stick to the idea that there is a problem, there's a big gap, and there is a sort of lack of understanding, and maybe that's not the word, but sort of, because the working class has taken a battering, and that's the problem for a socialist group. You have to actually say this is a problem. We're going to concentrate on that problem, and there's no easy answers, But at least if you're in even something like social democracy, a small group, we do go out there and we do make leaflets and put our propaganda to the different, like housing and all these different. All the major issues, and from our own experience, we know that because we don't stand back about what our message is, but that message is difficult for people to latch onto, and that doesn't mean it's we're not trying to talk in the language that people understand.
Okay, thanks. Paul again.
Does anyone else want to comment? I think what you said, John, in regard to that, you said that about, he answered you with something more general than the general points that you were making. I think that's basically true. What he said was more general than what you actually said. It was more specific. But I see the problem is this, that there are a set of political institutions, and there is an idea within Marxism that has been criticised time immemorial, which says that it's a misconception to think of political institutions, whether you call them the state or political institutions, are simply functional to capitalist expansion. Right. That you can have an argument around that because that's been an interminable discussion about whether that's how you should look at political institutions as simply functional. But if we take that view, you can look back and say that when Britain, for example, decided to join the EU, they made the first application in the mid-60s. It was Macmillan's government who made the first application. And they made it on the basis that that the European economy was, had a better growth rate and was appearing to be more successful than the British economy. At that time, this idea was around in the British press, calling Britain the sick man of Europe, right? So therefore, it was thought that, so the judgment was made by the political elites that in some sense, the institutions that grew out of the EU had been functional to capital expansion. In other words, they had assisted the growth and spread of capitalism. Right? And so the British made the decision and the Irish made the decision that it would be in their economic and social interest to join these institutions. Now, if you go up to today, if you take it from today's point of view, you could make the case that at least the British and possibly some of the other ruling class groups have made a decision that they're no longer serving their purpose, that the institutions are not being functional. In other words, they are not assisting the growth of capitalism, and there are alternatives to that. So they're not opting out of capitalism. They're not opting out of international capitalism. What they're opting out of is institutions that they might think are redundant. Now, I think that's where the nub of the debate really lies. And that would be a more specific thing in simply saying that capitalism spreads, develops, and concentrates and centralizes the capital and spreads it on a large scale. Well, we've known that. Marx pointed that out in the 1860s. Lenin knew that, Trotsky knew that. But the question becomes: are these institutions of the EU are they now functional to that purpose, or are they not? I think that's a specific question that needs to be answered.
Right. So can I don't want to keep on, so
Just coming back on that there, you're talking about capitalism, if it's some sort of monolith, but within the capitalist class itself there's a struggle, there's an inter-capitalist struggle. And that's probably what's been brought out by Brexit. There is a faction. Like Brexit, the Brexit movement wouldn't exist if a section of capital didn't support it. And you see the sort of finance that's backed the campaign, Brexit campaign, the hedge funds based in the US, energy companies. So there is a section of capitalism that favour Brexit, that favour that sort of deregulated sort of environment. But I don't think it's the dominant section yet. And I think that's what you're sort of saying, that some sections of capitalism don't see the European institutions as particularly advancing its interests. But I think that's still a minority. They're like an upstart element, and they're associated with the Brexit movement and Trump and so forth. Like trade wars, I don't think the capitalist class are generally in favour of trade wars. In terms of the European Union, the institutions of the European Union, they came in the being, in a sense they came after the fact that capitalism, European capitalism was expanding, that it was expanding beyond national borders, and the EU was a political reflection of that. But in a sense, it's just John said earlier, it's a failure as well, because in a sense that integration that's going on hasn't been reflected at an institutional level, and those EU states and EU governments are very much still tied to the nation state, but the nation state still retains a lot of weight within Europe.
And that's really a failure to we can all say that capitalism, the integration of capitalism, in some ways will lay the foundation for socialism, but it's never going to get there if it's guided by these capitalist institutions. That you have to go beyond that. So I think it's legitimate to raise the demand for a different type of Europe.
Can I just ask for somebody else? Because I don't want to come back, but I don't want to keep everybody all night. So.
Yes, sir. Anybody else want to?